Thank you very much for that. So good morning members and welcome to the meeting of the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing through the Council's website and on YouTube. Can I please remind you of a few arrangements in the guidance note? Microphones should be muted and videos switched off when you're not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any item, you should write speak in the Teams chat. Obviously, if you're here, just raise your hand. Unless if you've not got access, I will be looking. You'll be invited in speak in the order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we can deal with business as efficiently as we possibly can. Our standing orders will apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by a roll call, and if any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, we'll either, if you're physically present, we'll take a note, or if you're online, virtual, could you write leave in the Teams chat, please, and join when you come back into the meeting, please, if that's possible. First item for business today is a sedent apologies. Claire, I think this is over to you.
Thank you, Chair. We've got 2 apologies this morning from Councillor Bell and Councillor Karen Carruthers. For the benefit of all those on Teams, we've got 5 councillors present in the Council Hall, as well as yourself, Chair. We've got Councillors Campbell, McKee, Stitt and Scobie. There's currently 3 members not present, being Councillors Ingalls, Ronnie and I was about to say Councillor Thompson, but Councillor Thompson has just entered the room at the Council Hall. All other members present on Teams.
Thank you. So, as far as I'm aware, Councillor Ingalls is certainly coming. I think Councillor Ronnie is as well, so no apologies as of yet. That was the intention when I spoke to them this morning. So, item number 2 is declaration of interest. I suppose I should allow participation as also, just as the chair, you've got to allow participation of virtual members. I'll just make it at this point so any virtual members can come in. So, declarations of interest from any members. I'm looking physically within the room and we'll give a minute for the chat if anyone's got any particular points of interest. Declarations, I should say, of interest. Don't see that. Don't see anything coming in, Claire. Do you? No, we'll take that as no if for some reason something comes in later. And I see Councillor Ingalls has joined the meeting. So the minute is for approval. Any members got any particular points that they think is factually incorrect, or can we agree that it's a true reflection of the previous meeting? Thank you. Thank you. Let's give a wee second for the chat, see if anybody's got to come in. Don't see MD again. Retrospectively, if somebody comes up with a valid material point, we can reflect back on that. Councillor McKee.
Chair, just an error on page 11, 8.2, motion by David McCurkey. A bit of a clerical error there.
Okay, I did see that, Councillor McKee, so excellent, we picked up on that. That will be corrected for what goes out on the website, Jock. Number 4, I think we're heading to fast and furious. Yep, this is the report by external auditors. And we've got Joanne Brown and John Boyd online. The report itself, the report authors, let me just make sure I'm factually correct here. I've not got it here. We have, it's Gillian Ross and Paul Garrett as far as the actual report in front of us. So I wonder, I'll open it up to Paul or Gillian, whoever's leading on this, to come in first. I think that's correct. Paul, over to you. I think Richard must just be joining the meeting. Paul?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, nothing really to add to the report itself at this stage. Obviously, the main purpose of the report is to introduce the external auditors' report on the Council's 2020-21 financial accounts. So I think probably the most appropriate thing at this stage would be to pass over to Joanne and John to introduce the details of their report. But obviously then happy to answer any questions that members may have in relation to any of the issues that arise through that.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that, Paul. Thanks, Gillian. So Joanne and John, it's over to you. It's Joanne, I'll let you lead, and obviously you'll just can guide John in whenever it's appropriate.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. And firstly, apologies for the slight delay in you receiving this paper and it coming as a separate annex. As Paul said, this is our final external audit report, which concludes on the 2021 external audit. There are a couple of outstanding audit matters that the team are just working through just now, which we will close off before signing We've set those out on page 17 of the pack, which is page 11 of our report. So subject to the completion of that remaining work, we anticipate giving an unmodified opinion. Just like to formally pass on my thanks to the finance team. It has been a difficult year working again remotely, whilst everybody's been juggling a number of priorities, but I think we're in a very good place to be able to get the accounts signed by the original timeline of the end of September. And that's a credit therefore to the finance team for their hard work in supporting the audit process. What we'll do is we'll just take the report as read, but I'll pass over to John, who will briefly pick up the key points we want to draw your attention to, and then we'd be more than happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Jo. So in terms of our annual report, as in previous years, it's split into kind of two key areas. The conclusions of our work over, or the audit of the financial statements, and the conclusions from our wider scope audit work. So these are the wider audit dimensions that we are required to consider and report on under the Audit Scotland Code of Audit Practice. In terms of the audit of the core financial statements, the draft accounts were of a good standard, which we received to audit, and as was the supporting documentation to back up the audit. This was a particularly challenging year with COVID-19 and the range or the different types of transactions that were going through your accounts, particularly with COVID grants being received and the sheer volume of the grants being received during the year. And I think the accounts have or the finance team have done a great job in demonstrating the use of that money, both what was applied by the council and then where the council was acting on behalf of the Scottish Government in administering those. In terms of the financial statements audit, the report concludes on the areas of significant audit risk. So these are areas where in our audit plan we've identified there's an increased risk or heightened risk of material misstatement in the financial statements. And we have outlined our audit approach and conclusions over each of those areas, and pleased to report there were no significant matters that we need to draw the committee's attention to. In terms of the financial statements audit itself, we've identified one adjusted item. This was a presentational adjustment to the cash flow statement, which the finance team have updated the current and prior year accounts to appropriately reflect the requirements of the code. There's one, you'll note there's one unadjusted audit difference, which we consider to be immaterial to the financial statements. This was in relation to period 12 capital accounting entries, and you'll see those included within the appendix to the report. And management have agreed an approach going forward in terms of addressing them for future years. As I mentioned, the report also provides commentary and conclusions on the wider scope audit dimensions. So this covers areas of financial management, financial sustainability, governance and transparency, and value for money, and also our overall conclusion around the arrangements for securing best value and demonstrating best value at the council. I'll not go too deeply into each of those areas, but you can see in our report where we've identified the risk in our audit plan that was presented to the committee earlier in the year, and then where we've reached a conclusion over each of those areas. We've included within the report a number of recommendations around both the financial statements audit as well as the wider scope audit work, and these have been agreed with management with agreed implementation dates. We've also followed up on those recommendations raised in our prior year audit report. But that was really the sort of main areas I was hoping to confirm. The rest of the report in the appendices confirms our audit independence, and that's obviously an area of where we, as auditors, are required under ethical standards to confirm our continued independence of the council, as well as confirmation of our audit fee for the financial year, which was also included with the annual audit plan. But happy to take any questions on the report.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Joe, for that. So I'm looking internally first, physically. I know certainly 4MD puts their hand up. I know Councillor Johnston was keen to make a couple of points. Malcolm, are you there?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I have to say that this report is, I think this must be my third or fourth one I've been through, and I feel quite more reassured with this one than I have with any of the others, to be quite honest. But it was just a wee. I've just got three little. They're not big points. They're quite little. And John, you've already alluded to them to a certain extent in what you've said, because I picked up on the cash flow statement, and it's something I mention quite often in the council, that we get muddled up between operational and capital. And you mention, and it's page 18 of the report, and it's I can't see the page number on the other report, but it must be page 12. You say that we've got a complex process to separate this out. How are we going to? This is more for Paul, really. How are you going to take that forward? The next one is, we say it's insignificant. It was the overstatement of depreciation, and if you're going to do anything with depreciation, overstating it's better than understating it. So that's good. But a lot of people, members of the public, don't actually think that £284,000 is an insignificant amount of money. And another point I think I raised last year or the year before was about the valuation of the assets, and I'm pleased to see that we have implemented.
You've muted for some reason, Malcolm.
It could potentially be very volatile. I think there is a risk, and the valuation of the assets is, in a lot of ways, is the foundation of the sustainability of the council. So if I could get some response to that, please.
Thank you. So it was for both. So it's both here, Paul, Gillian and John there. We got kicked out for about maybe 15-20 seconds there. So we missed the last point in around about I think it's depreciation we were talking about, Malcolm. So, but anyways, you lot heard it. If we can come back to that, if we're not sure, we need that fully recorded. But wonder, John, if you could answer your parts first, then we'll come back to you after that, Paul. Thank you.
Thanks. In terms of the cash flow statement, I think there's kind of two aspects. There's obviously the aspect, do you need the cash flow from a sort of cash management perspective. The actual accounting entries required under the code stipulate some of the disclosures. So the error itself hasn't, or the adjustment itself wasn't an issue with the actual cash flow or the cash flow entry. It was more around the disclosures within the cash flow. So hopefully that reassures the committee that it wasn't an error in terms of the numbers, in terms of the cash flow itself, in terms of the bottom line of the cash flow statement or anything like that. It was just how they were disclosed. The code is quite specific around where some of the entries go. And actually has a separate kind of toolkit to help that disclosure, which is slightly different than how a council would operationally manage its cash flow projections. In terms of the depreciation, it's essentially a bit of a quirk of the fixed asset system itself around when the valuations are put in, and then when the period 12 capital transactions, so additions and depreciations, flow through. I appreciate 248,000 is obviously a significant balance, but from an audit perspective, our audit work's undertaking the concept of materiality, and therefore it would, from an auditor perspective, we would deem that not to be material to impact our opinion on the financial statements. Hopefully that sort of covers off. I don't know if Paul wants to pick up any other areas.
Yeah, no, thanks, John. That's helpful. I think taking the points that the Councillor Johnson raised in order, in terms of the cash flow statement, as John says, it was specifically a presentational issue. We do recognise that our processes perhaps are a wee bit complicated and could be streamlined and improved going forward. And one of the things that we've been doing, and Gillian's been taking this forward, is we've looked to utilise going forward the SIPFA toolkit on cash flow statement presentation. So that will help assist us in terms of addressing and improving that process going forward. But as I say, it was specifically a presentational issue in the accounts. In terms of the depreciation issue, again, Councillor Johnson, I agree that in some senses £200,000 is not an immaterial issue, but I think in terms of the overall audit report, and also taking into account that this is an adjustment to an asset value which is just under £900 million in total, I think in terms of the accounts, that's why it's been described that way. But what I would say is that the change in practice, the change in timing of transactions, which will allow us to ensure that's addressed going forward, we will make sure that's implemented from the next financial year's annual accounts. So that should be addressed from now on. The final point, I think you're just looking for that confirmation that the use of an external independent valuer for our assets will be utilised. And just again to confirm that that was not a one-off, that was it's good practice that we do use that independent expertise to assess our asset values. So that's something we'll be looking to continue on an ongoing basis from now.
Just before they go offline, Malcolm, are you content with the answers? Do you want to come back?
No, I'm perfectly happy with that. I fully understand the fact that the cash flow thing doesn't have an effect on the actual balance. I was well aware of that. I do think it's an important disclosure so that you know what is actually coming from capital grants as opposed to operational income. And I was a wee bit more concerned about the fact that it refers to that it's a complex process to set it out, and how that was going to be remedied.
Thank you. Thanks, Malcolm. Thanks for the answers. We have Councillor Katie Hagman and Stephen Thompson. So, Katie, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee. So we've got the external auditors report before us, and thank you for that. I'm just looking for some reassurance, really. One of the big sort of ticket items, if we want to refer to it as that, was the investigation into the 4th generation trunk roads maintenance. And it is picked up on in the report on page 41 of our pack, or 35 of Grant Thornton's report. And it says in there that you have reviewed the findings of the KPMG and the Integrity Group investigation, and that we as a council have responded appropriately to the recommendations. So my question really is, were you able to, when you were pulling together this report, were you working completely independent? Because obviously you are the external auditor, and it's important that we do have that sort of external eye coming in that does remain independent. So it's just really looking for some reassurance, because obviously we have gone through quite a journey with this one, and it has come out that we are on the right track and we have responded appropriately. So I'm just really looking for confirmation on that one. My second point is actually in terms of the best value audit, and it's more really for Paul and the council team, because it's mentioned in several points that the council has demonstrated good progress against key priorities, and we're doing well with that. But it does go on to say that we should strengthen the current performance reporting arrangements to enhance transparency of public reporting. Often our our papers aren't that accessible. They're all online. Members of the public can listen to all our committees. But I'm just wondering if there's any key points taken from that specific action that we, as well, Paul and your team, are going to take forward in order to strengthen that government performance reporting. So there's 2 points there, Chair. Thank you.
Just come in as you feel appropriate, just because we get a lot of feedback when I turn my mic on. Joe or John, whoever wants to come first with that.
Apologies, Chair. I can pick up the first point, and then I think the second point Paul Garrett would be able to pick up on. But in terms of the trunk roads piece, just to provide that assurance, we are external to the council and we are independent. And we had a review of the papers, the way it'd been reported, and the action plan, and the council's response to those actions, and how proactive the council's been in taking those actions forward. So we are able to provide that assurance that we've set out in our report, that good progress has been made and that we're satisfied the correct action has been taken by the council.
Thank you for that. So Paul, will bring you in, and Katie, you obviously will get the chance to come back if you make sure you're happy with the answers. Paul?
Yes, I think the other point was in relation to the recommendations to look to enhance performance reporting within the council, and maybe just to highlight that that's a specific action that's been pulled out by the auditors for further progress, and as recommended in the appendices to this report. There's work going on within the council at the minute to look to enhance the various means that we use to communicate with various stakeholders, including using the website more effectively going forward. The action is being led by the Head of People and Transformation, and as part of that we'll look to ensure that appropriate financial information, performance information supporting that financial reporting is actually reflected in that enhancement of performance information that's now been made available to public and other stakeholders in Dumfries and Galloway. So it is an area that we have got in focus as a specific action in this report, so that will mean that it will come back for further review through this committee to have a reflection on the action that's been taken in response to that recommendation, so members get the opportunity to review the progress made over the upcoming period in relation to that action.
Thank you. John, I don't think you want to add anything, are you?
No, nothing from myself.
Okay, thank you. Katie, back to you. Are you happy enough? Have you got anything to add?
No, that's all very reassuring. Thank you, Chair. I think it is important that we have, well, clearly it's important we have external audit, but I'm confident in the report we've got before us. So yeah, thanks very much to all those that have been inputting into this. It's not a small piece of work, so thanks.
Thank you, Katie. Stephen, Councillor Thompson, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. It's actually in relation to page 49 of 180, which is the auditor recommendations, specifically in relation to common good revaluation. So later on in the actual accounts, I think that's page 103 or whatever page it is in the report, it sort of gives a breakdown of the common good accounts, if you like. Now, I'm just sort of wondering where this recommendation will report to within the council in this financial year. I'd certainly be very interested because my experience of common good subcommittees is, let's say, it's quite inconsistent across the piece so far, and obviously would want to bring that kind of in line. So I'm not sure that the common good subcommittees, as referenced in the accounts, have actually even reported within this financial year yet. So it's hard to know from a member level or a public level where we sit with that, and I'd welcome sort of just finding out when we'll start to see that coming to members of this council across the piece. I'm just wondering if anybody could speak to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. I think it looks like Paul's wanting to come in on that. I've seen his mic being released. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, can I just, before I do answer, can I just check with Councillor Thompson, is that the page titled Misclassification and Disclosure Changes that you're referring to there in reference to common good in there?
Yeah, so in the auditor's report, it's that page, Paul.
Fine. Yeah, thanks you. Yep. So just to say that this is specifically relating to the presentation of the final accounts in relation to the common goods. The information that we tend to focus on through the Common Good committees themselves is based on the level of resources available to the Common Goods. This will not impact on that. It's a presentational issue associated with the accounts. But what we'll look to do is to ensure that when this has been further reviewed and information is available to make the adjustment, that we refer back to the individual Common Good committees and provide that information at that stage. But I see Gillian's come in as well, so I don't know if there's maybe something to add to that. Gillian?
Nothing of any great additional information, but just to say that this is an issue that's sort of been reflected as part of the FAM transactions, which we've become aware of. And as Paul's indicated, we have reported some positions up to the Common Good committees. I think Kukubri is probably the first one that's been up to date. And as we go forward and identify the adjustments that are required to be made, we will report those as part of those updated reports to those Common Good subcommittees during the year.
Councillor Thompson, Stephen.
It was just a very quick point. I mean, obviously I welcome that rollout this year across the Common Good subcommittees. I think where I'm still trying to get an understanding is the likes of high profile things like the Dumfries fountain, I think, which is a Common Good asset, will require significant investment, but not necessarily investment from the Common Good funds. So I think sometimes there's investment into assets that are the Common Good that it would be good to see them at Common Good subcommittee so that people have full sight of how they're being managed. And yet there's other values to assets which maybe that needs to be sorted out, and that's part of the work that we're doing. And there's also income from leases which don't clearly get reported, but maybe that'll be included in the wider sort of income and expenditure statement going forward. So forgive my sort of lack of the proper understanding, but it's really just how does the normal layperson understand how this works in relation to the overarching reports. Thank you.
Paul, you're coming back in, I think.
It's not adding too much to what I've previously said. What this recommendation is referring to is a presentational issue in the accounts. Some of the things that Stephen's mentioned there are a bit wider to that, which reflect kind of member consideration of appropriate funding sources for required investment in assets. So I don't think that will be directly addressed through the action relating to the audit report, but I think there's probably a wider issue that Stephen's alluding to in terms of reporting of issues associated with common goods, where that relates to required investment, funding issues and so on. And that's probably something we need to develop a bit further with colleagues in the communities service. So I think it's probably separate to this, but recognise the issues that the Councillor Thompson's raising, and we'll look to discuss how we address those more appropriately with colleagues, as I've mentioned there.
No, fair enough. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Stephen. It's something that Annan Common Good, as an example, they're on top of that. Annan Town Hall and Annan Harbour, for instance, have come up on a number of occasions with the same kind of conversations. Very interesting subject matter, but obviously not for today, but good to carry on at some point in the future. Don't see any other members looking to come in. So we've received, as per recommendation number 1, we've received our presentation from Joe and John, which is looking at, so receive an external auditor's report. As per Appendix 1, and we've had a presentation. We're going to approve the letter of representation for yourself, Paul, is the second part of that. We're happy enough to do that. Don't see anybody else and nothing to speak. Like I say, we can revisit if we'll just double check at the end, because we do have a slight delay in the virtual side. 3 is approve the audited accounts, which will be certified by Head of Finance and Procurement and Grant Thornton prior to the 30th of September this year, as detailed in Appendix 3. And number 4 is to note that the certified accounts will be made available to all members by the 15th of November this year, and it will be available on the Council's website as outlined in paragraph 3.6. Don't see anything in the chat, so it looks like we're moving on to item number 5. Thank you. So that is our annual complaints. Let's double check my notes. But we've got annual complaints. I think we've got Charlie and Lindsay here to speak to this one, to be absolutely sure. Yep, see Charlie there now. So rather as we talk about this, I was quite impressed with this, I have to be honest. It seemed like an honest and true reflection. I've got a number of small points maybe to pick up on, but I wonder, do you want to add or say anything to your report, and then I'll open up to members' questions.
Thank
Thank you, Chair. So our report details the Complaints Annual Monitoring Report for 2020-2021 financial year. The appendix reviews our complaints handling against the 8 key performance indicators which are set out nationally by the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman. As you'll see from the figures, we've recorded the lowest number of complaints that we've seen in the past 5 years. This is sort of Q1 and Q2, we've seen a marked reduction in the number of complaints received, and this is likely due to the disruption to public services due to national lockdown, whereas in Q3 and Q4 we started to see this sort of return to normal levels. I don't think we've got anything else to add at this point, so happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Lindsay. So I'll open it up to members. I'm looking for John. I think we've got... Oh, no, sorry. Oh, no, sorry. I'm just trying to update myself. Jane, in regards to what you're saying. Okay, I think that's John. I think you're wanting in this particular item. Councillor Young, that is. John?
Thanks very much, Ian. Thanks. And good morning, everybody. As way of background, first of all, I was a named person in a complaint which was submitted on the 28th of June. And it was actually escalated to level 2 by the interim chief executive. Now, the person who submitted this complaint actually found the whole process very stressful, very disempowering, and emotionally incredibly draining. And I'm actually not sure this person would ever submit another complaint to the council because of her experiences with it. But that's the background. The complaint was actually upheld on the first point of complaint, and the second point was not upheld on the grounds that there was insufficient evidence. So, Chair, the point I want to make is on page 20, 3.2.7. The last sentence says, this is significant as it shows in half of the cases considered at stage 2, we were not at fault. Now, I find that statement incredibly, I don't know, it's just wrong, basically. It's an inappropriate use of language. What they actually found is it shows that the cases considered at stage 2 were not upheld. It doesn't signify the council was not at fault because, for instance, in this complaint I'm discussing here with you, Chair, there was insufficient evidence. It doesn't state the council was not at fault. And that phrase saying we were not at fault is repeated on page 25 and also at page 30. There's a sort of, I don't know, a sort of smugness to that comment. You tried to catch us out, but you haven't managed it. So I would actually like that phrase, we were not at fault, taken out of this report and replaced with simply was not upheld. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, John. It's actually something I did pick up with myself, with Moen Group, just that piece of language, but I'll come back to yourself maybe first, Lindsay, give yourself a chance to just go over that. I mean, I think it probably is appropriate what John's saying. It almost like it's more of we are not at fault is certainly a way of describing it. I just wonder, Vlad's got to come in, so Lindsay, hold a second, Vlad's wanting to make comment on this first. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out, and it's something I'm more than happy to amend and to note that moving forward for future reports. So not an issue at all in terms of amending that language and take that on board fully.
Mm-hmm. A little bit defensive is the only thing I kind of thought, but John, you've obviously got your own comments in regard to that as well. So, John, if you've got any particular thoughts, either you can in regards to what the language should be changed to, you can either give us it now, we'll put it in chat, or it could be caught up at a later point directly with yourself, with Vlad.
Thanks, Ian. I feel it just needs to be said was not upheld. And the other thing, and this might seem a bit off, but there seems to be an almost pride in the fact that the number of complaints is down. I would actually, as a council, we should be welcoming complaints. It makes the service we provide to the public better. We shouldn't find the process so stressful and difficult. Somehow our complaints process seems terribly complicated and, to be quite frank, the one I'm aware of, quite soul-destroying. As a council, we should be encouraging people to complain. We shouldn't be defensive about complaints.
So just because of that last comment, Lindsay, I'll just ask you to just come in, because I feel that again that should be answered. It's about the welcoming rather than being defensive towards, because we've got different comments. You can come back on that, Lindsay.
Yeah, obviously sorry to hear that this particular customer has had such a bad experience of the complaints handling procedure. That's obviously certainly not something that we would want. And I think we have been doing a lot of work around making sure that people are welcome to make complaints. So it's mentioned in the report that we implemented the revised complaints handling procedure on the 1st of April 2021. And we've actually done a lot of promotion around that in terms of, you know, getting it out there that we do have the complaints handling procedure. We've done social media posts. We've put things in the newsletter that gets sent out, the community's newsletter, and, you know, updated all of the website to make sure that the information is accessible. We've also been doing a lot of work to make sure it's accessible to various different groups as well. We've got a British Sign Language video which now explains the complaints handling procedure, and we're just finalising an easy read procedure as well. So I think we are certainly trying to work towards making the complaints handling procedure a lot more accessible and encouraging customers to make complaints.
And just to add to what Lindsay said, obviously we can't discuss individual complaints, but when it gets to a stage 2, we certainly encourage the officer to speak to the complainant and, you know, discuss the complaint and see if we can help them and work with them to address their complaint and resolve it as quickly as possible.
Thank you both for that. John, we'll leave it at that. So we've got 3 further speakers. We've got Councillor Driver, Hagman and Councillor Maitland. So Archie, you're first.
Thanks very much, Chair. And you know, looking back over the last sort of 5 years, 6 years, and 3.2.1, yeah, there is a marked reduction. But of course, there's been less interactions with the public over the last year as well. But what I'd be really interested in, because I believe that, you know, the 281 complaints is a very small percentage of the interactions and transactions that the council actually do every year. I believe there's hundreds of thousands of interactions and transactions. That's not to say that we shouldn't welcome complaints, because I think we do welcome complaints, and the biggest majority of them are actually handled appropriately. So I'm just wondering if there's any idea of how many interactions and transactions there is by the council over a year to receive, you know, at the most, it was 2019, 456 complaints, because as a percentage, I believe that would be very, very little. Now, we will expect complaints from, you know, people, and they will be resolved at stage 1 or stage 2, depending on what the complaint is. I have to say that I've been involved in a complaint very recently, and it was handled very well and appropriately by the staff in the homeless department. So I was pretty proud of the way those individuals dealt with that. So yes, you're going to get complaints about how we handle complaints as well, but how do we know how many transactions and interactions do we have every year? Because I would imagine it'll either be in the hundreds of thousands or even millions.
Thank you, Archie. I think Vlad's wanting to answer this one, ladies.
Thank you, Chair. I understand the question, but I think it's actually going to be impossible for us to quantify the amount of transactions that we're involved in, both in terms of service delivery and otherwise in terms of other transactions that we may have with contractors and so on. So I think it's understandable in terms of the volume of work that we have and what we do and the services that we deliver, that it's going to be a significant and substantial number of transactions, but I think it'd be very, very hard to quantify that.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Vlad. Archie, are you content with that before we move on?
Yeah, I'd love that. I would imagine, Chair, that it would be hundreds of thousands or millions, as I said, of interactions and transactions every year.
I think that's the case, but I think just to reflect, and I think we're all entitled to bring up our points, and so even if somebody sounds like they might be complaining in committee today, I think actually you can take the positive from that. So there's things to be learned, and that's the point in particular what I picked up on. So unless somebody else touches on it, I've got a couple of points maybe to touch on, but I think the examples that have been given, the learning points, that's the value in like this report. We can see actually, okay, somebody hasn't been happy, there's been a number of complaints, but here's the positive that came through that. But I'll maybe touch on that unless somebody else does. So we've got other speakers first. first we've got, I think it's, let me just double check, Councillor Hagman next. Katie?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do welcome the report. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that, you know, we don't get things perfect every time, but I think what the point Archie made there is, yes, we have hundreds of interactions with customers on a daily basis. So it's really important to not get so focused on what could be perceived as a negative outcome with this report. Before I sort of bring in my question, I would completely agree with Councillor Young's point. We've got on page 30 the definitions of outcomes, and that's quite clear: upheld, partially upheld, not upheld. So in any reports, we should be using those languages. So I would welcome his contribution and the confirmation that we use our own definitions when putting narratives around these reports. My question really is, obviously we're approving the report today, so I'm quite happy to report or to approve that and the publication. But my question really is about the projected figures for 21-22. Now, you mentioned that we have updated the way that complaints are processed and advertising, and there was a comment made about welcoming more complaints, and certainly looking at the figures projected, we're well on track for that. So the table on page 36 refers to the first quarter. Obviously, we've not quite finished the second quarter, so we only have that data before us. But in 2021, it was sitting at 41. Whereas 21-22 is 119. That's almost 3 times as many complaints just in the first quarter. Now, if we look at the total, which was 281 for that same year, 2021, if that gets extrapolated up 3 times, we're looking at approximately 843 complaints for the year, which is a significant increase. It's almost double the 1920. So I'm just wondering, is that change something that you as a team are feeling, that there's an awful lot more complaints coming in? Obviously, we don't have the full year's data or even the full second quarter's data, but if that is something that's apparent and coming forward, is there lessons to learn as to how we can almost improve on? In one respect, we're calling for more complaints and we're projected to get more complaints. So now we're saying, well, how can we reduce the complaints? But it's just, where are we in terms of the local authority, in terms of getting a handle of where we're at and going forward? Thank you.
Oh, sorry, ladies. Vlad's wanting to come in first. Then
All right.
We'll invite you after that. Sorry about that.
And I'll bring in both Sharon and Lindsay to speak to that. But from my perspective, absolutely, we have to keep note and monitor all the trends within this. There may be factors within that, and I think COVID, in terms of the reduction, has had a significant impact in terms of last year's one, so I'm not sure that's a good comparator moving forward. But absolutely, we've already discussed that within the team in terms of the gradual increase and whether that's going to be in line with previous years or whether that's going to be an increase. Is something that we'll keep a close eye on and we'll continue to report via this committee in terms of any particular trends. Now, there could be a number of factors, obviously, in terms of that increase, which we can obviously analyse and dissect in due course. But at this point in time, I think it's more than anything a matter of keeping the monitoring and reviewing of these trends and then reporting thereafter.
Thanks, Vlad. Katie, I think it's an interesting question that you've posed. I really do. And it's something that merits quite a bit of debate. But ultimately, your question is saying, like, okay, this is a trend, and ultimately, I think, how do we actually combat that? How do we get on top of that? We don't know what a whole load of unhappy, unsatisfied customers, so to speak. And I just wondered, certainly go back to you, Katie, to finish off what you're saying, but the question lies there, when it comes to this, how do we actually, that bigger question, how do we resolve it? I don't know if that can be answered today or not, but we'll maybe let you have a stab at that or not. But Katie, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I appreciate Vlad's response, and I think that's exactly where we are. I guess my only other question is, does the team have the capacity to, and are the team managing with the increased capacity going forward? Because obviously that is quite significant. And, you know, have the team got sufficient capacity to ensure that all our complaints that we do receive are acted upon and can follow the process without delay? Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Vlad?
Yeah, in terms of, I'll probably refer to that previous answer in terms of we will continue to monitor and review, and like any other area of work, if we see a significant increase and a lack of capacity to deliver that, again, as part of our reporting and business cases that we'll put forward yearly in terms of any particular increase that we see and require extra staffing on. So I see that again as a monitoring and reviewing issue, and thereafter reporting through the relevant processes.
Thank you. So just to touch on, unless you've got anything to add to that, I see you coming in there, Chari.
It was just to add to what Vlad said. Obviously, we're keeping a close eye on the trends, and we've only got the first quarter for this year, and we'll soon have the second quarter. So I think once we've got that information at hand, obviously we'll be looking at that, and that will give us the first half of this year. And as Vlad says, we'll see what trends are happening and see if we can predict how, you know, things are going and what things we need to put in place, and looking at the learning, etc., from what information that we get through from the data.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, we have got our new complaints management system, Respond, which we implemented in October last year. So we have put some different fields in there which we can now report on, which will help us monitor trends. So if there's a particular area where we're getting a lot of complaints, or there's a particular type of complaint that we're getting, so for example, professionalism of staff or something like that, then we can actually pull off reports on that, which we're going to be doing on a quarterly basis, which would allow us to sort of see any areas that perhaps need targeted, as Councillor Hagman was saying, that would allow us to sort of pinpoint those areas and try and tackle them so that we are improving in those areas. And we will be monitoring learning from complaints on a quarterly basis as well, and asking services to look at, you know, how they can improve services based on the complaints we've received.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Lindsay. Vlad, a quick procedural question from my perspective, because this could come up on a number of occasions. So we're looking at a factual report here, we'll look to approve it. We accept the facts, the different information that's in there. That'll go out to the public domain. But Councillor Hagman is bringing up the point, okay, what if these facts, I'm taking table 3.2.1 for instance, that there's a trend saying, okay, we're going from 456 complaints, it feels high enough, but we're heading towards 800. I'm using that as an exaggerated example. How then do the members of the committee, or even the committee as a whole, if they've got concerns in regards to that, this is a fact, so we agree this today, how would we, so if we've got see a trend that we're concerned about, how do we then get that reported back to us just for factual? So if Katie's saying, okay, that looks bad to me, we agree to the report because it's factual, but how do I see that coming back to get the assurances that I need to know that trend's on a downward trend? I think, Katie, if I picked you up wrong there, I think that's ultimately what you're leading to. You're looking for the assurances, then I'll move on. Vlad?
Yeah, these are internally reported first and foremost in terms of our governance. So we've got an information management group that a lot of these stats will come through, but thereafter it's absolutely we can bring this back to committee if that's a particular request, but I would suggest that in this instance is one for us to monitor, review, and thereafter go through the right governance, which might well be at times communities or at times Auditors and Scrutiny in terms of the relevant delegations, but we can also offline, absolutely, for those that are interested in particularly looking for a further report in due course, just through members notification or briefings. I'm quite happy to trigger that as well.
Thank you. No, thanks very much. It's an interesting debate. So we'll move on to Councillor Maitland, then Thompson, and then maybe we've got Councillor Driver coming back. So Jane, it's over to you.
Thank you. Chairman. I think we've actually, just in the last a couple of interventions, you've probably covered really what I was trying to get at, which is a development of Councillor Hagman's requests and arguments. Because, I mean, complaints sit at the absolute apex of the grumpy customer triangle. And underneath all that, is going to be all sorts of feelings of as opposed to actually getting out the pen or the tablet and actually writing something down and complaining. So I suppose really it's working from places like the planning system, which asks applicants how satisfied they've been about the planning application, but how does that actually dovetail with what you're telling us today? And how would we know, although I think you've just started to expand on it, Lindsay, through your response system, how would we know what the trends are? So I would like to be assured in some sense, because there's work going on in the council about the culture of the council and the trust that members have of officers actually doing their work, and therefore expanding that, the trust of the public. And I think maybe Vlad has suggested there could be a report showing us how these things all connect together. I think that might be useful, Chairman, to definitely get that to happen. But it's about assurance that we are in fact moving to a better culture of the officers responding public in what Councillor Young was pointing out was not a very satisfactory way.
Thank you. I'll put that to Vlad first.
Yeah, I think we will be reporting these further figures in due course. As I mentioned, I'm quite happy to keep, we're continuing our internal governance in that regard, and thereafter governance through the relevant committee. So I'm happy to tee that up in terms of, in particularly the learning that comes from some of these complaints and the lessons learned, and we're already looking at that, as Lindsay's pointed out. The bit that might be more difficult to join up is the other part that Councillor Maitland mentioned there, in terms of the further work that we're doing in terms of the culture and so on, and I understand the two dovetail, but I think the reporting through that culture element of it may tap into the complaints processes rather than the complaints process leading on that particular work stream as such. So they're absolutely interlinked, but I think it's probably any reporting that's been done through that culture element of it should look at how we're managing complaints and the lessons that are being learnt through that.
Thanks, Vlad. So what we'll do is, Jane, are you happy with that? Because we've got another number of speakers, and so ladies, keep your thoughts. If you feel that something, you want to add something at the very end, I'll go through the speakers first, and then we'll... But it's...
That's absolutely fine. I know it's difficult. It's a thorny question.
Thanks for that, Jane. Thank you. Thanks very much. So I think we've got Councillor Thompson, Councillor Dryborough and Councillor Scobie to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for covering quite a lot of the points that have been raised by members today. I think the only one that had outstanding was actually on the definitions on page 30. And it was more a question of, I suppose, dovetailing again, but with the SPSO, because I think they've done away with partially upheld as an outcome. And while I welcome the fact that we should define our own outcomes, because obviously we have our processes which take place before the SPSO would really sort of get involved, I suppose. Do we need to think about what partially upheld means, or is that, because I think they use some upheld with recommendations or something like that. So it's really just a question on, do we need to look at that, or are we fine just now until we need to change, basically? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Lads, want to come in first?
Unless the team have got any particular different opinion from myself, I would suggest that we keep keep it as it is for the moment, but again, it's something that we can review in due course. I think we need that middle ground, and that's a tried and tested mechanism that we have used in public sector, and therefore I suggest that we keep it for now. However, taking on board the comments is something that we can monitor and see what best practice is out there in that regard, and maybe do a bit of benchmarking to make sure that we've got the right approach moving forward.
Thank you. I think you coming in, Lindsay?
Yeah, please. Just to say that the revised complaints handling procedure was published by the SPSO for implementation on 1st of April, and it still does refer to partially upheld within there. We actually spoke to the SPSO direct just to make sure, because we had also heard the same, that was no longer a term that was used, and they assured us that partially upheld is still terminology that should be used and one of the outcomes that they see. So there's upheld, partially upheld, not upheld, and also a new complaints outcome as of this year for resolved as well. So we'll be reporting on that next year.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Stephen's more than content with that. He's giving me a nod. So we've got Councillor Dryber, then Scobie, then we'll bring this to a conclusion.
Right, thanks very much, Chair. I suppose that's a not proven verdict on that particular question there. The question I want to ask is about when is a complaint not a complaint against the council? Because obviously we've got utilities, we have RSLs, housing associations, but somebody will put a complaint into the council about their workmanship, and it might not be the council's interaction that actually does this. So who decides when it's not a complaint against the council, and what's the process that goes through that?
Ladies first, I think, this time. Oh, is it Vlad, were you coming in there? No, sorry. No.
Yeah, I can come in, Chair. It's a good question, but that's part of identifying the complaint, identifying what the issues are, and against who the complaint is. And we do get complaints that are against third parties, and maybe there's misunderstanding from the public as to what our role is within that. So yeah, we do get these from time to time, but it is a matter of identifying it at that early stage as to exactly what the complaint is and against whom, so that we can process it accordingly. Obviously, we'll thereafter inform them that we're not the right mechanism for that complaint, and at times we point them into the right mechanism if we know what it is.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, it's almost like being a wee bit pregnant, this partially upheld. I could never understand that either it is or it isn't. You know, it's almost, as has been said there, are not proven. However, I'm looking at page 35. Weighing that against, indeed, what John Young has said, and grateful for John bringing this up, I had marked 3.2.7 in terms of 50% not upheld. That means 50% were upheld. So that's equally a compelling factor to anything, and it's 50% of a figure. But it's the silent majority out there that don't make a complaint, that feel it's not worthwhile making a complaint because they're frustrated or maybe have gone through the system before. Because on page 35, there are worrying aspects to this. In each of the departments referred to there, like offer a consistent approach where working with adults, which means that is there an inconsistent procedures is new, and we're looking at it to see how we can become more consistent. Next one is improving multi-agency discharge planning where individual needs are more complex. And we've got an increased number back again to discharge from hospital. Again, people that are in there and may never make a complaint, but yet are compelled to a service that is less than satisfactory. Again, moving on to staff to raise their, as a result of a complaint, for staff to be aware and understand the issue around the legislation, people will, with incapacity, including power of attorney and guardianship. And we know that that's an issue in delayed discharge. And how are we doing with that? and we don't actually see. I could go and see complaints coming forward. So it's that silent majority. What we're dealing with is 50% of complaints upheld, and how many people don't make the complaint or may never in their life make a complaint and accept the service for what it is. So it's how do we improve and continue to improve the service so that we don't, or we get to a stage where we get less and less and less. And it's not about, you know, trying to stop them making complaints. In Communities Directorate, good customer service and provide a refresher on the Council's Code of Conduct. These charges are currently being implemented as part of our thing. There are issues in each and every one, and it's, you know, how do we get to a stage where all, you know, the improvements, and I'm not suggesting that improvements aren't necessary and needing to be done, but so there's a consistency and dealing with, you know, just not on percentage, but the silent majority who may never make a complaint.
Thanks, Willie. So before you, because we've got Councillor Thompson coming in, is it on the same point, I think you're saying, Stephen? And you still can get the question answered collectively?
It was actually on the point before Councillor Scobie, so I'll just wait. That's fine.
Okay. Okay, but I think you're going back to the point we were making earlier, Willie, in particular. Okay, how do we see the improvements from again, let's see the positive actually from the complaints.
Well there's so much needing in here, Chair, in terms of recognising that improvements need to be done, about consistent working and so forth. And it's a touch on that, because what we're looking at, we're focusing on the 50% that were upheld rather than the 50% that were not upheld, and the silent majority who just accept the service for what it is without making a complaint.
Vlad.
Yes, thanks, Chair. That particular section, you'll see points to that improvement and work undertaken. So it is absolutely, it's about lessons learnt here, and that's how we improve our service and how we go about delivering our services for the community at large. So absolutely recognise the point in terms of ensuring that we're doing that, and we're identifying that as we go with the various complaints, and looking to see whether the service could have done anything better. And absolutely, one of the points was raised earlier is about, one, the promotion of the complaint system and processes so that everybody's knowledgeable on how they go about that. And number two thereafter is that resolution part, which was mentioned by the team earlier, and trying to get the appropriate resolution, because it's not about just going through a bureaucratic process of a complaint. It's about getting to the right outcome for that particular customer, and the lessons learned within that will be crucial to ensuring that it doesn't happen again as much as possible, where we find that there were either failings or processes that we can be improved on. So that's an ongoing assurance that we can give, and you'll see that within the report in terms of these are the things that we have improved on, we've identified that we can improve on. It will just continue that lessons learned. I don't think we'll ever stop. So it's just recognising that we will get complaints, that we will have to learn from them, and it's just a matter of setting up the right processes to deal with them, but more importantly that we're dealing with the customer as best we can to give them the best experience that we can, going back to what Councillor Young was mentioning earlier.
Thank you, thanks for that. And Willie looks satisfied in regards to that. I think it's certainly a good answer. I'll take that as a no reaction, Willie. Councillor Thompson, on a related point you're saying from a previous question?
Yes, thanks, Chair, and I'll try and be quick. But it's about the clear lines of accountability. So it's really just about there may be times when there's a complaint raised with the council because of a service delivered by a third party. And this is obviously can be often very confusing, not just for ourselves when we're trying to monitor performance of third parties, but for members of the public who see effectively somebody acting on behalf of the council, but it's actually a private company or a third sector organisation or a care provider or whatever it might be. So no doubt the best thing would be for those organisations to have their own clear lines of accountability for a service provision, but then ultimately we're responsible for them delivering on our behalf. So obviously we would have some role in responding to that. And of course that becomes quite convoluted and confusing, I think, to members of the public and elected members, and even to the people running the organisation sometimes. So I think maybe, obviously, that to me seems like an area where things can fall through the gaps or get confused. And is that something that we're constantly trying to manage and get on top of?
Vlad?
I don't know if the team are able to comment on the more specifics of that question and how many we're getting. I suspect we're not getting that many relating to potentially third parties that we are contracting into, but absolutely that's something that we would need to manage, particularly through the contractual process, in terms of managing performance and liaising with that particular party, but also if they're carrying out particular services for us, and in essence they're stepping into our shoes, then I would expect us to be dealing with that through our complaints processes as they stand, albeit that there'll be a contractual element to this as well. So that would be the supervision element of the contract, alongside the improvements that we need to have as an overall council and service delivery.
No, thank you, and I'm assured by that. And I just noticed as you were giving your answer, Councillor Maitman's comment in the chat, which relates to contract monitoring effectively, which is kind of where you're going, but that's a side that's almost a separate committee, if you like, although it's obviously naturally dovetails with the actual complaints procedure, for example. So hopefully we can have that holistic view to deliver better service for our public. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to sort of raise a very small point. There's no more further questions or comments within the chat. I don't see any hands up here. It'll be, so for the sake of moving on, just very briefly, like I say, I'll mention the fact I liked the example that was given. I think it's on page 12. It's actually on page 12 or 34 of our papers. I think it's 12 of the actual appendix paper. So there's a number of different, there was an example, a number of different improvement actions or work that was undertaken. But see, so I think that's a great example, and that's the positive coming out of adversity, I would say. But seeing that this bit, I've asked a couple of people, other elected members, what does this mean? So the second last bullet point on that page says updated schools guidance on elected member consent in relation to disclosure of special category personal data for pupils in line with GDPR. What on earth does that mean? Sorry, just get that clarity.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's probably one we'll need to take away. These examples are provided from the complaints handlers and coordinators within the service, so we'll need to pick that up with a colleague and come back to you if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you. No, that's perfect. Like so the two reasons we're here to look at these is to approve it. So it's a factual report, and like I say, I think it is a good healthy report. And the amount of debate it's stimulated, that would actually add weight to that. And that's a 2.1, 2.2. So if we've agreed that and approved it, 2.2 is to approve that. So the publication of the report on the council's website, which is a requirement from the SPSO. Thank you very much, ladies, and you, Vlad, for all your interactions and interjections. It's been a healthy debate.
Can I just come in, please?
Certainly, that's you, Archie, I think.
Yeah, it's the report be done, but those minor adjustments that John Young mentioned earlier on.
Absolutely. So we'll take that as a given, and I take it, Claire, you will have noted that as well. So, and I think both Lindsay and Charlie mentioned earlier that would be done, that language. So okay. So it is subject. So we're getting it subject to those amendments as discussed through the debate. Thank you very much, ladies and Vlad. Item number 6. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is a health and safety report. Right, let's grab my notes. I think I'll be Sue to speak to this one. It is. Here's Sue's coming up now, Sue White. So this report is provides members with performance progress update on planned corporate health and safety activity against the corporate health and safety plan for the period 1 April 20 to 31st of March 21, along with interim emergent actions by council health and safety following the onset and prevalence of the COVID-19 for this period. So Sue, are you wanting to add anything to your report or up to questions? I'll leave it in your hands.
Thank you. I just want to make apologise for admin error. Recommendation 2.3 for an amendment to be made at 2.3 recommendation for paragraphs. It should read 3.15 to 3.19 and respectively again at 3.20 to 3.22, just for the record. I'm happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. So we've made those, and so when we get the recommendations, obviously we'll just double check them. So I am looking for, it looks like you're looking to come in, Archie, is that correct? Archie, Councillor Dryburgh?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just on page 47, Sue, on the review corporate health and safety plan, which was on hold and restarted. Obviously, during COVID, the review of health and safety standards and welfare standards were ongoing. So I'm just wondering why it would be placed on hold, because I would see that as a continual review anyway during that particular period.
Okay. This relates to the formal review of the corporate health and safety plan that was previously that had been submitted to committee some years back, that is overdue for review. So it's the formal programmed plan rather than the responsive reactive one, if you like, that obviously, yes, health and safety is continually reviewed on a sometimes hourly, particularly in the last year basis. So, you know, yes, priorities are continually reviewed, but that is referring to the actual council strategic, you know, to a strategic level plan that is due for review, and following the restructure, then that will be submitted back to committee for endorsement.
So, Chair, if I can come back in on that particular point, then the corporate plan, then, well, I'm sure have been enhanced over that period, and probably increased in size by a great number of different things. So, when are you looking to have this completed, and when will we have a report back here or at the Health and Safety Committee?
Well, with the appreciate the actual structure, the 3 point reference on the plan at 3.2 and 3.3, the council we've basically done a whole restructure. So we're looking at doing a whole big engagement exercise with the services. So the final issue we're looking at will be the turn of the year to actually provide that revised report. But that will follow a period of engagement with representative managers, union safety representatives as well, and then that will be resubmitted to the Joint Safety Committee, and then will be coming to this committee after that. But it will be the turn of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you both for that. So Councillor Hagman, then Young. So Katie, you're first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so again, we've got lots of facts in this report, so thank you for that. And we're looking at the year 2021. I've got a question really. It's in terms of the training and the table that's on page 49. Now, absolutely appreciate COVID. You know, it will have affected, and the report clearly states that due to restrictions, it did affect the delivery of training courses. But I'm just looking in terms of the number of courses for managing personal stress and stress management for managers. There was 0 courses being put on there. Now, considering how stressful some of the situations that have been over the past sort of year, I'm just wondering how we're looking to catch up on that, because looking at the percentages on page 43, it makes reference to 1.5% of staff were absent due to work-related stress, and it's something that, as a council, as elected members, we are very aware of mental health and resilience and how we look after our staff, because it is a challenging time. So that's my first point. My second point is, in terms of the actual table on page 49, it's got the sort of total number of the number of courses, and it's got the total number of staff that have done training. But it doesn't have a percentage of how much we would have expected staff to do. So, you know, are those numbers on track? Should we have done a lot more but couldn't because of COVID? Or did we exceed the number of training? You know, where's the benchmark? We've got figures, but they're just sort of left without any comparison. So I guess I'm looking for some idea of, is the trend up, down? But clearly we do have the background of COVID. So, you know, I appreciate that it's not a simple answer as these things seldom are. So yeah, thank you, Chair.
Hiya. Yes. First of all, then regarding the personal stress, all throughout COVID, the Health and Wellbeing Group have been doing supportive health and wellbeing campaign, and there's been e-learning available. There's also a new programme being delivered over the autumn for 300 managers to get trained, and we're working through this through the occupational health provider. Also, as far as it is recognised that, yes, particularly on the management of health and safety training side of things, it has now just getting restarted, and indeed Managing Safely Refresher, Managing Safely is restarting again next month. And yes, there is certainly a catch-up. The Lifelong Learning Centre, as far as comparisons of what we should have in place and what we have, the Lifelong Learning Centre have been reviewing the requirements on this, and I can go back and ask the Lifelong Learning Centre on what the current projection is going forward, and what can be delivered. But the information in detail, I'm not sure if it's available from historic, because just how the data is getting collected has been reviewed going forward. And yes, we would love to be in a position to actually give that information, and we can get back to you on that. I'm quite happy to contact the Lifelong Learning Centre for that and report that.
Katie, I'll just give you a chance to come in if that's required or not. Are you satisfied?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, the last thing I want to do is create more work for the service, but I just think for going forward, it'd be really useful to have that benchmark. So I don't particularly need you to come back at this point, but just for future, if we could request that, that would be really great. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, and it's certainly recognised ourselves that's very important. Yeah.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks, Sue. So, Councillor Young next. John.
Thanks, Chair. We have a proportion of Dumfries and Galloway Council staff who are now working from home. I think it's about 20% of staff continue to work from home, and that will probably be ongoing. How do we know that they're working in a safe working environment when they're working at home? And who is responsible if unfortunately some accident befell our staff during their working hours while at home?
Okay. The council have just issued a new hybrid and home working policy, which includes the manager's requirements to do assessment for those that are working from home, which includes physical aspects of working from home, but also mental health and wellbeing and staying in contact and engagement with staff. And I think it's a key area of that, of regular engagement, and also recognition as well that it is, lone working needs to be considered as well. And particularly on the mental health and wellbeing for that regular engagement.
Joanna, you want to come back in?
No, that's quite reassuring. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thompson. Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. It was actually in relation to the table as well, to do with the training, but I think it was more a question about given that there was no sort of management level training, or I think it was one or two, and all of it was sort of face to face, if you like. We did get a bit of an answer there, just talking about the rollout of management training, but it was really just about how well equipped are we now, because that would have been a great time to make the use of digital technology, obviously. However, we weren't able to. And now, as we sort of go forward, are we as fully equipped as we need? Because a lot of those management courses have maybe more of a sort of theoretical element and not just practical, whereas a lot of the face-to-face training was directly practical training with devices or appliances, etc. So it was really just to get a sense of how well suited we are going forward to deliver as much as we can virtually when appropriate, you know, in conjunction with the other aspects of training. Thank you.
Okay. I'm aware that the Lifelong Learning Centre are reviewing the actual e-learning training platform that the council use, which is a huge opportunity for us for indeed recognising and meeting the need to increase the level of e-learning training that we've ever been able to be made available. And there's a big opportunity here, and we're definitely going to make use of that. As far as delivery of some of that training, we are, yes, reviewing some of the courses to see is some of the elements of the training can we do online. And in fact, the Managing Safely refresher training that's been organised for next month, instead of doing that face to face, we're actually trying it out, and we're actually doing that first one online. With IOSH, we have to meet approved criteria for delivery. And so we've got agreement that we can deliver that online. So it is certainly going to be an area that we're definitely going to exploit going forward. And it's certainly a stage where we have got some more development work to do to try and get some more items online. However, there is a very much need, particularly on health and safety, to do some face-to-face training as well, to take into account the practical elements, like, for example, incident investigation. You know, we're quite keen, for example, on things like that you do need to have the face-to-face. So that will be a blended, we're looking at certainly a blended approach going forward.
Okay, thanks for that, Sue. Thanks, Stephen. Just no further speakers, really just quick, probably as much a point as anything. And if you've got the information, Sue, fine, but you haven't, it doesn't matter, we'll pick up at a different time. 3.17, which is page 42 of our report. It just talks about the reportable incidents, the HSE. I just wondered what the age profile one was and gender in regards to that, because it does relate to, I suppose, the training in Appendix 2 as well, but come back to probably more detailed conversations in the Health and Safety Committee, I think. But
yeah, to be more detailed data behind the level stats are looked at, but from a Joint Safety Committee, I'm quite happy to give some more detail on particularly your question now on age profile and gender. I'm quite happy to provide that information, no problem. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but I'm happy to come back to you.
okay, no, thanks for that. It just says whether I suppose it's an appendix to the question for me was the relevant or appropriate level of training available to it, and I automatically think it's probably older male, but maybe I could be proved completely wrong there, but just that's what it was. So recommendation 2.1, we're asked to review, and I think we've done that. Appendices 1 and 2. 2.2, we've been asked to review our health and safety. We've got I know it's further down. So those paragraphs are fine. So just if you could qualify that. 2.2 is only 2.3. We needed to change.
2.3 to read 315 to 319 and 320 to 322.
Thank you, and we've reviewed them as well, and I see Claire taking notes in regards to that. That's been noted. Thank you very much. Welcome back, Councillor Scobie. Thanks, Sue. Thanks for your time with that one.
Thank you.
Scrutiny review follow-up. So, Vlad, is this you? No, sorry, I'm just trying to catch my notes here. Fraser, excellent. Fraser, if you're online, this is for you. It's whether you want to speak to this report or just go if there's any appropriate questions or relevant questions. I think, Paul, maybe you're in hand for this as well.
Nothing further to add to the report, Chair. Just have to take any questions. We've also got Stephen Atherton from Procurement and Graham McAlorum from BTS to assist with any queries members may have. Excellent, thanks for that, Fraser. So we'll open it up to questions. So I'm looking physically within the room until we see if there's any typing going ahead. I've got, I suppose, a case scenario I'd like to put in regards to. Don't see any hands up. Nobody coming in as of yet, I don't think. No, Councillor Maitland, I thought you probably want to come in and data sharing. Jane, over to you.
Well, Chairman, it seems a very long time since we started to get this one going. If you remember rightly, the data sharing scrutiny review, and I'm glad to see it's got to this point. And I know the two Grahams worked hard on it with a kind of series of steps and hiccups along the line. I agree that that we've come to the end of the line with respect to this particular review. I think there's no question about it that the committee has got a review here. We've got the recommendations mostly in place. My concern now is about the use of this technology, as you can imagine, but that's not for this particular review. And I just want to put down a marker that I think that we should not take our eye off the ball with respect to prodding the project along and getting practitioners to use what has been put in place by the technological guys. I just want to know, there was a proposal, Graham, I think, to put in a project manager at one stage. Now, I believe that you did go out to look for somebody to push the project along, but didn't actually succeed in finding someone. And I just wondered where we had got to on that, whether it's been quietly dropped as an idea, whether the resource is there, or what the situation is. But thank you for having got this to this point. I will say that we were supposed to have something done by the end of 2018. Here we are, nearly at the end of 2021. So it is slow progress, but it does seem to be finally have actually got there in terms of the technology being in place. But if you could help me with that question in particular.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it has been a long project, but just to note that we do now have a fully automated sharing of information between the two organisations. The project manager, which was a suggestion from the Chief Officer Group, has been taken forward by the Health Board. They initially did an internal troll, and as you rightly say, no one came forward. So I believe they're now going out to an external recruitment process, and I think that's currently the stage that it's at.
Thank you. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, right, anybody else in the So I'll pick up on the second review then, and I'll put this into context. So I'm not sure if it's yourself, Steve, or Paul, whoever wants to answer this question, but it's almost identical to what you've just raised there and was raised in earlier discussions in regards to how do we follow these through. So if we draw a line under these now, which probably is the appropriate thing to do, I think probably similar view to yourself in regards to comes to the local economy through the procurement process one. But what's come up recently, and I just wonder, if this is just a one-off, is there other examples across Dumfries and Galloway? My gut feeling would tell me it's probably not just a one-off. So I won't go into the personal details, but so just to put the case, the history behind it. Obviously, we did the review. So how do we best grow the local economy through the spend that the council spends on an annual basis? We had through the FPT committee on the back of what happened with the trunk roads. Full council made a decision to do a full review in regards to procurement. And Steve, you're here and you've added a lot to that. And there was a thoroughly good review undertaken. But as part of that review, so I've had a constituent approach me in the recent past, very recent past, who have provided products and services. You can say it's an SME. I think it's classed as an SME, small medium-sized enterprise, but it's 70 to 80 employees. They've provided products and services to Dumfries and Galloway Council since the late 60s, so over 50 years. And in the last 6 months, there was nothing at all, no products, no nothing. So they contacted the council, and then through their official route, then contacted myself as well, and said, "Listen, why is this? We don't understand." But here, it's the framework agreement that they'd missed out on any publications that they should have been onto that. It had been a different type of purchase, obviously previously, as we're all aware. So we could say that, okay, let's draw a line under this at the moment. I'm looking for a bit of advice here as well from yourselves as officials. But ultimately, it goes back to all these things, whether it's how do we actually, if we've still got potential concerns, how do we keep an eye on this? How do we make sure, okay, because if this business has been affected, they'll try and rectify that now by getting it some kind of framework agreement. That's a process that they'll have to follow. But if that's one, there will be others, and ultimately our goal is to, through this particular review, was to grow the local economy through the procurement process, but there might actually be blockers still there. Actually, this is much easier for large companies, that again, we've not got loads of them in Dumfries and Galloway, but for large companies to enter this type of process and be successful through the bidding process or the procurement process that we have in place. So that's, it's similar to yourself, Jane, my point. Okay, if as recommended, we draw a line under this, where can we actually follow up if that's the case? Where do we make sure that we are doing everything we can to grow the local economy through the procurement process? And actually, if it comes to data sharing, it's a similar. So I see you're coming up, Paul. Thanks for that. I'll let you have a stab at that first, and we'll maybe come back to your point as well, Jane, just to make absolutely sure where do we follow this through, whether it's council, IGB, so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. You made reference there to the review through the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee. And one of the kind of key aspects that's been recognised through that review is the need to support our local businesses, to support our local economy as effectively as possible going forward in order, one, to support local businesses, but obviously to ensure that that's done in a compliant manner as well. There's specific recommendations through the FPT review implementation plan, which make reference to the importance of further developing our supplier support arrangements. And I know that both Steve and Karen have been putting in place various arrangements to better support our suppliers through events and other programmes and other forms of communication to make sure that they're in the best place possible to compete for council work. And that's a key area of priority for us going forward. I'll bring Steve in a second. I think probably the other point to make reference to is it's not just about trying to ensure that our local businesses can effectively compete for council work. One of the things that we've been trying to do, and I think is actually becoming more effective, is actually trying to ensure that local businesses, through involvement in wider public sector frameworks, are actually getting access to work from other councils and other public sector bodies as well. And information we're starting to receive back from Scotland Excel is that that's proven effective, and we're starting to see that come through as well. So there's various strands to the support for local suppliers, local businesses. The kind of thing, Ian, you've made reference to there, it's not an isolated issue. It is something that we are aware of, that there is a number of concerns regarding the extent to which local businesses are in a position to effectively compete for council work and supported in order to do so. So it's very much something we've got high on the agenda to try and develop in an appropriate manner, but as effectively as possible going forward. But Steve and Karen have both been kind of key to developing those arrangements. So I don't know, Steve, if there's anything you can maybe add to that at this stage.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Chair. Let me perhaps try to make it a little bit more practical for members to be able to see really what, or understand what we've been doing and the work that Karen certainly has been motoring along with over the last couple of months. So in essence, we've already identified, as Paul said, that this is a challenge for us. So what we've actually already got in place is a Borders, South of Scotland enterprise and a Dumfries and Galloway meet the buyer type event. We're going to tag it differently, but that's already arranged for April. We're currently in the process of arranging something specifically for Dumfries and Galloway suppliers at the end of January. The reason for those timelines is that Karen and her team and myself are working on producing, as a result of the member-led review, a new, clearer, more concise set of documents, more concise set of templates that can be used by businesses, and hopefully we'll simplify it. Those will all come together by the end of this year, and then we'll launch those into the supply market. Now, alongside that and those events, what we've trialled literally on one piece of work recently is no one sits there looking at the Public Contracts Scotland database saying, oh, I wonder when this piece of work is going to come through. So what we've done is we trialled using the council's Facebook page and said, there's this requirement coming up if you're interested, and it points them towards PCS. So we're trying a different medium to be able to engage with the local suppliers. As Paul rightly pointed out, what we've also been doing through Scottish Excel or Scotland Excel is actually getting our suppliers more visible to other areas in Scotland, and that's worked pretty well. But I think we're not going to solve this overnight because it's part of this whole package of work that needs to be done. And part of that package is to make sure that we simplify how we engage with the supply market. We also make sure it's much fairer. So what we've been doing, and your point, Chair, around the sort of size of work. So we've done a couple of bits of framework work, not directly, I think, related to this particular supplier, but where we've made packages of work that are small enough so that the SMEs locally can have a fair crack at that work. That doesn't mean to say they'll automatically win it, because obviously there are regulations around values and all the rest of that sort of stuff. But if we lot it appropriately, it gives our local suppliers a far better chance. So we've done a couple of pieces of work like that. So we're bringing all of this together with Karen and I, and I would, as part of the FPT review, see this coming to fruition and much more visible to members as we turn into next year. Key to all of that, though, in terms of looking forward, will be that piece of work around the contract register, which is more that the word contract register tends to put something in people's minds. What we're looking at is producing an end-to-end life cycle of a contract so that actually we can see when we've got an idea that we want something through to the point at which we manage it to disposal. And that will be available within obviously the council and to members, but we can make much more of that available to the population and the supply base via the council website. So that will give businesses a better view of what's likely to come, what is in place, what's going to come going forward. So it's a fairly coordinated package of work that we're putting together, is already well underway with Karen, and hopefully it will satisfy not just the bare bones of the review and the recommendations, but more importantly takes us to a place where we can be more of an exemplar than a follower, I think. Happy to take any questions if anyone's got any.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Paul. No, that's certainly I've got a lot of reassurance for what both of these are actually saying there. I suppose it comes back to, I'll come back to you now, Jane, as well. It's obviously what you're saying, it comes back through FPT. We'll see reporting mechanisms there. We have direct contact if we want. I think that's probably what I will undertake myself in the short term. I have attempted that through phone calls, but haven't had any response as of yet. It's only criticism I would have. But so, Jane, when it comes to reporting, are you content? So it's the same issue, but different examples. How do we do want to draw a line under these so that they are behind us within a piece of work, and ultimately we've seen them through, we've seen improvements, but how do we keep our eye on that? I mean, your one goes into IJB as well. I think goes beyond the council. But Jane, are you happy with the answer you've got up to now, or do you want more information in regards to that reporting line and how you keep that close eye on it, as you were mentioning earlier?
Well, Chairman, thank you very much indeed for bringing me back in. I don't think we can do anything in this particular committee, but I do think that we should probably follow it up elsewhere and make absolutely certain that it doesn't get lost. And I would have to take advice from Vlad as to how we basically make the link between the work that we've done here and either the IJB or Social Work Services Committee and indeed FPT for the other review. So I would like just to take some advice, I think, so we can hear what the correct process would be.
Thanks, Jane. Vlad, then Councillor Thompson after that.
I'm thinking that probably the best thing, Councillor Maitland, is maybe for us to take an action on that, for us to consider that request and then thereafter report and discuss that with you and seeing if that proper process meets everybody's needs or whether we need to have something else. So I suggest in essence that we'll take an action and thereafter report back to yourself, Councillor Maitland, on that specific point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, is it on the exact same point? Stephen was in first, Willie? I'm looking at... No, Councillor Thompson, then Scobie.
Thanks, Chair. Just on that point there, yes, I mean, I agree that we do need to draw a line under what we've done to date because we've sort of fulfilled the scope of what we're reviewing, I guess, and then find out ways to sort of maintain the momentum on how that then goes to the next stage of delivery or implementation. And I would welcome knowing what the proper way to do that is, because sometimes that's where we're not sure, so we need that advice, and I welcome that coming back. And I'm sure, like within our own services and social work and across the partnership, it'd be good to get that that oversight as to how that's getting taken forward. Just on the point you'd raised yourself, Chair, just about local procurement, I suppose when it comes down to it, I know certainly that, and I've linked with the procurement officer, just in terms of like local groups who are really wanting to work with the council and deliver local projects and ideally use local contractors in the way that Stephen sort of described there about, well, how do we then work with local groups to sort of structure things in a way that we can still stay within procurement rules, if you like, but also enable local contractors to really embrace that and get on board with it in a way that maybe looks at a sort of smaller lotting system locally. And then that way it helps us grow our local economy, either through community groups sort of being the interface or through local projects that drive that forward. So that's something that I think we should really develop, and I welcome Stephen's sort of take that we lead by example and maybe show the way forward with that. So I'm glad that that's something that we're looking at doing. Chair, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, and I think, you know, we went through a lot of interviewing, talking to businesses, people who had their own businesses within Dumfries and Galloway. We have come to a conclusion, as the report indicates, but to see the fruits of our labour, if I want to put it a better way, and you gave an example, I think that we should be looking for a 6-monthly report to see how effective the work that we did do is impacting and having a result on local businesses in the procurement and so forth. So if it could be possible, rather than going back to one individual councillor, that it comes back to the committee and we can see that what we're doing is having an effect on local businesses within the procurement rules, and we're seeing businesses picking up on work as being put out by the council. So I would rather see, you know, a 6-monthly or yearly, whatever the duration, but it reported back to Scrutiny Committee so that we can see what we have done is effective.
Thank you for that, Willie. So just before, I'm not sure if it's just that, but Stephen's wanting to come in. Steve Atherton, that is. I'm not sure if is it on this point? Yep.
Yeah, it is. Just to address the point that Councillor Scobie said, Dave, just to first of all, obviously, bring to members' attention that in the past year we've grown our SME participation, where over 36% of our spend actually does go through local businesses, which is a great achievement. Is it where we should stop? Absolutely not. We need to grow it more, but let's not beat ourselves up too much on that. So we do the annual report, but I'm sure that we can certainly produce something at the 6-month point to give a sort of a view at that point, but also a view perhaps at that point where likely procurements are going to come up as well. So we can probably do that. I know Karen and I have been talking about how we make reporting more realistic and practical rather than just a set of figures. And I think earlier on in your session, we were talking about comparisons and benchmarks and trends, and Karen and I have been talking about it. So we already spent 36%. That's about £67 million, just to give a context. But we can absolutely produce something, I think, at the 6-month point. Thank you.
Ollie?
Always good to get information like that, Chair, and I'm sure it will be found in some report somewhere. But that's the very thing that I would see that we do need, and just what businesses are being successful in what the work that we have done and are doing. So that's the kind of information that we would then see that we have been successful or effective in what we have done through the workshop. And as the person just said, can we increase on 36%? In some way, I'm sure what can be done, that's just over a third. So while is there more work can be done on the work, and we need a 6 monthly, as has been said, that's possible.
So I just wonder then, would it be a simple recommendation of 2.4, just to receive a further report in 6 months or approximate? We'll take guidance in regards to that. Stephen, you're thinking Paul's coming in now?
Just to say, Chair, happy to support that, but the Finance Procurement and Transformation Committee receives quarterly reports on procurement process, and part of that is information on the level of procurement spend that's undertaken locally. As Steve says, it's gone up to 36.5% last year. 2 years before that, it was 30.5%. So we're seeing significant increases, and we'll look to report that on a quarterly basis to the Finance Procurement and Transformation Committee. So that's something we'll look to continue. We'll also reflect in those reports some of the specific measures were undertaken to support our local suppliers to look to increase those percentages further. But those reporting arrangements are already in place through the Finance Procurement and Transformation Committee. So I don't know if there's anything kind of separate required through the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, but obviously happy to take members' advice in respect to that.
Thank you, Paul. Wally, just to come back to yourself, so Paul's saying that it obviously gets reported to FPT every 3 months rather than in 6 months, but so just to take your take on that, please.
That's even better than 6 months. So if it's possible that it's reported to one committee, then I'm sure it can come back to this committee on a quarterly basis so that we can look at, scrutinise the effect of our work. So a quarterly, even better.
I think for the sake, Paul, of everybody not being on the FPT committee, it'd be, I think, maybe even 6 months. Bring something back 6 months, and you'll be able to pick up in regards to the notes, comments, so on and so forth. What's been got just on that particular subject matter. I think Willie's got a fair point. We'll just add it as a 2.4 as a recommendation that we receive a report back in approximately 6 months. Ultimately, if there's a slight difference to that, because there's a better level of information, could be if you had to wait another month or another committee cycle, then that would obviously be appropriate, I think. So it's for the fullest information, it's just to get an understanding. Willie, from your perspective, is that actually we're achieving what we set out to achieve in the first place. And that could be the end of it, the next one. Yep. So looking at the... Jane, you're wanting in. Sorry. Councillor Maitland?
No, Paul has provided all the advice that are required. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So recommendation 2.1, we're asked to note, which we can, sorry. 2.2 we've been asked to note as well, as per the Appendix 1, 2.1, Appendix 2, 2.2 and 2.3 agree that the scrutiny review recommendations continue to inform development, so on and so forth, as per paragraphs 3.10 and 3.11. And a simple 2.4 recommendation that we receive a further report back. It'll be based, Claire, predominantly on the discussions on growing the local economy through the procurement process, the discussion we've had today as outlined previously. So if we can capture that, we'll see that in a minute when it comes back. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your discussions with that. Item number 8 is our internal audit reports. I think, Richard, it's possibly yourself. That's Kevin Gertie, I think. Sorry. Let me just find this, give me a second. It's just our internal audit reports issue. So it is Richard. It's in my notes as Kevin, so I thought it was you, Richard. Richard, do you want to talk to this or just take questions? It's up to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, for the first report on council tax, this is the second part of a report. The first part was reported to this committee in April. This report covers the collection and recovery process of council tax, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I'll look for hands in the room first, see if there's any chat. We're being asked to note and comment. Don't see any hands in the room. I don't see anything in the actual chat. Okay, so we've been asked to note and comment in regards to the finalised internal audits, so we can take that as a given. Item number 9. So it's our annual internal audit report and controls assurance statement. It could be you, Richard, it could be Kevin. It says Kevin, but it's probably yourself, Richard. Just not sure who's leading in this. So it is Kevin. Kevin, so over to you. Any comments? Do you want to speak to this at all? It's up to you, or do you want to just take questions?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, members. Happy to take questions on it. This is the annual statement, but I think it's pretty well self-explanatory, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Kevin. So I'm looking physically in the room first to see if there's any hands going up, which is not. People are furiously reading and looking at the previous notes, I think. So obviously it is, again, it's a note and report in particular. So I'll just check the chat. We do have Councillor Dryborough. Archie?
That's all right, Chair.
Sorry, Archie, I didn't see that there. Thank you. With any particular points at hand, we've been asked to note at 2.1, the completion of the 2021 internal audit plan in full was disrupted, but core assurance work was prioritised. And at 2.2, against the note the internal audit's control assurance statement as per the appendix, which gives a positive assurance in the council on the council's internal control arrangements for the year. Thank you, members. Happy to note. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, Kevin. Item number 10. Kevin, is this you again? Yep.
Yes, Chair. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, do you want to, I'll give you that option again. Do you want to speak to it at all, or just take questions? It's up to you.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, we're running a constrained plan for 21-22 assurance because of a relatively late start and a vacancy that we've been carrying, and also use of our resources in a different way, away from directly from audit work in some aspects to support risk management programme. So it's a tight programme, but effectively, if we adopt this plan, I've asked for agreement to 200 days and an extension, if you like, for the completion of the work till May. But we will then be able to produce a controls assurance statement for 21-22 year. What I'm pointing out is that if we are successful in filling our vacancy, which we're progressing at the moment, or any other changes occur, that we will come back to the committee and make use of the time that we'll have available to a slightly different plan. We can add extra things into the plan and so on. But for the core assurance work, which is what we need to deal with first, unfortunately, it limits, because of the amount of time we've got, it limits how we can do that. So that's what I'm asking you to agree at this time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. That's appreciated. Just on that particular, because you brought it out, it's just a human resource thing, Kevin. So the council, I think, all authorities across Scotland, the nation actually, but I mean, getting people on the ground now to actually deliver services, goods, right reports is extremely difficult. I just wonder, if, from an audit point of view, that's your subject matter. Have you got a particular view in regards to that? Is it as difficult with yourselves as it is in any other department?
I think we've seen, I'm part of a group of Chief Internal Auditors across Scotland. We meet quarterly, virtually, and yes, it's a common theme to say audit resources have been constrained. In some cases, auditors have been moved out of the team and put into other support work and so on during this time. So everybody's struggling a wee bit for resources. Our original plans and scope and so on have been constrained, but we do have a core job to do, which is that assurance, that annual assurance. So that remains a focus and has, I believe, been successfully delivered. Not aware that any local authority has been unable to receive from its internal audit section that annual controls assurance statement and so on. So we're doing less than we would like to do generally. Plus, of course, audits themselves are proving more difficult to deliver. We've had some issues, the timescales become a bit protracted. We recognise that some services have been under considerable pressure and strain, so accommodating auditors is sometimes challenging for them. But we've worked successfully. You know, the work that we've done this year has shown that it can be done. It's lesser in quantity than we would like. The full scope of audit opportunity gets a bit limited, and that's partly to do with our own resources, which we're addressing. So it's been challenging, but you know, we're not frontline. We can't claim to be frontline services dealing with the absolute necessity that arises from the health emergency and other things. So we're trying to do our bit, staying in the background a wee bit, but on the other hand, not letting go of our core job and trying to maintain our end of things and to report into members. It's important you have those reports and those assurances from us, particularly around the controls system and so on, that it's still working, it's still functioning, and has proved to be quite robust in some ways in dealing with fantastic new challenges. You know, for instance, the grants program that's been delivered by the council, very significant sums of money. And we successfully stepped up to the plate and delivered that. So it's, you know, it's a good news story in some ways, in lots of ways. Looking forward, we're a bit pinched, but I am also looking forward to next year when I'd expect us to be back, giving a fuller scope to audit work really from next year onwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. So we've got a couple of speakers now. We've got Councillor Hagman and Maitland. So Katie, you're first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Kevin, for the report before us. And I'm looking at the appendix, which is the internal audit charter. I think it's a hugely important piece of work, or not piece of work, but a charter, you know. And I think the key mission statements, the definitions, the responsibilities, this is all really important stuff that we are all aware of, and we all know it, and we all have confidence in it. So I think the service, the department, the team that you're working in is hugely important, and it is something that, you know, we do need to be mindful of, and to make sure that we give you that sort of credit, so to speak, going forward. I'm just looking in terms of the responsibilities, and forgive me, I'd had a note of it. It says on page 19 of the supplementary plaque, and it's got authority for the operation of internal audit. And it says that the internal audit manager on 21 has unrestricted right of access to the council's chief executive, the chair and members of Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee, the Section 95 officer and monitoring officer. However, I'm just wondering, would you not have unrestricted right of access to all elected members, not just limited to those within the committee? Because clearly internal audit covers every aspect of the council. So that could be to do with education, it could be to do with finance, or you know, even roads or any of those aspects. So I'm just wondering why it doesn't include all elected members and only those of the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee. Thank you.
Chair, I'm happy to respond to that. Thank you, Councillor Hagman, for your positive comments. I would say that we are very well supported by the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee, and have been over the years. So certainly, you know, I feel well supported, and definitely feel I can have open discussions with the committee and be challenged by the committee as well, which is, yeah, I think, necessary. In terms of what the charter says, it kind of, we have a sort of power. It's not much of a power really, but internal audit has because it has a voice and it has a right to voice, that is a kind of power, and therefore that power needs to be structured. So the correct process, if you like, is you know, on an operational basis, I would expect to be able to be discussing with heads of service and, if necessary, their directors, and ultimately the chief exec, with the monitoring officer and the Section 95 officer along the way, if I have a serious concern. That's the way it goes. I would also probably, in the first instance, discuss it with the chair and vice chair of this committee, in terms of that's where the locus of responsibility sits. Now, if I had a concern, using education as an example, if I had a concern, certainly I would want to be briefing the chair of the education committee, and as to what the nature of that is. But I possibly seek to do that through the chair and vice chair of the committee rather than directly. But there have been occasions when, yes, I've been asked questions by senior members around particular issues or particular concerns, and had a dialogue with them and a discussion with them about our perspective and so on. So it is a very open relationship I have. But in terms of for the audit charter, I think it's an interesting point you make. But for the audit charter, there is that structure that's in place that says, here are my absolute entitlements and reporting lines. I don't think having or not having access to, say, the chair of education committee would be an impediment to internal audit's work in those circumstances. But I say, on a personal basis, I much prefer to have good relationships with members and open dialogue and open discussion with them. And if that did necessitate a direct contact, say with the chair of communities or the chair of education, I would do that. I can assure you I'd do that. It's not formalized in the charter. So I hope that sort of sets the tone for or the context for why that's written the way it is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Katie, so it sounds that was a good answer, I would say. Katie, are you happy with that?
Yep, I'm happy, Chair. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. So it is predominantly related to the chart, and we've got serious concerns. So Councillor Maitland, Jane, you're next.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Kevin, we're being asked in the recommendations to agree 2.2, paragraph 3.31, and you talk about the development of risk management arrangements. But without saying specifically how much resource you're going to apply to that. Now, this was something that the external auditors got quite excited about last year, I think, and the year before, the risk management arrangements in the council. And what do you feel that we need? What do you plan to put in? It's work in progress, I know, but is it something that you will be putting up as a priority in comparison to the other couple of things that are mentioned in that paragraph? What do you plan to do?
Chair, I'm happy to answer that if you wish. Yes, resources for internal audit are of interest and a concern for this council, and you have oversight of that. We've been managing, shall we say, carrying a vacancy which has been used to contribute to savings requirements, but we're now moving to fill that vacancy. We're at a point when I think if we don't fill that vacancy, I will have to be reporting to you that we have such limitations on audit that it begins to impair our ability, say, to give a controls assurance statement. But also we contribute to risk management and it varies a bit. It changes. Some years we kick in 10 days to corporate support, and other years we've contributed a bit more. So the requirement is for a level of support to risk management development which exceeds something that I would normally include in the plan. And the reason, so we have a couple of options how to handle that, but the reason why we're doing what we're doing is because my colleague, who is experienced and knowledgeable of risk management, and the council, and is of sufficiently senior level to be able to make some progress on some of the issues that we face. So I'm putting much more of his time into risk management, which diminishes, therefore, the amount of time available for audit work. And that's the challenge that I face. Now, I'm due to put a paper to the Communities Committee, which deals with some aspects of this. There's a sort of co-responsibility in the operation of internal audit between Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee and Communities Committee. But what I'm doing is I'm explaining what I'm doing. So what we're going to do is appoint somebody at a more basic auditor level on a temporary contract. And so the idea is that the time I will lose by supporting risk management at a more senior level from within the team, I will recover in terms of audit doing at a lower level from an extra auditor. So I'm recruiting both a permanent auditor to bring our team back up to full strength, and also I'm going to recruit a temporary post which will be used to give me the flexibility to be able to do more audit work in terms of quantity. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm sorry, I haven't explored that in full in this report, because at the stage I was writing that report, this was still in discussion. But we've concluded those discussions now, and I'm happy to communicate to the committee that that's what I'm doing. The key thing, I mean, obviously the committee might have a view on all of this, but the key thing is I am not drawing your attention to a concern about that. I think that plan will work, and it gives me the resources that I need to deliver a fuller audit programme next year. If we get it sooner than that, I'll certainly be coming back to you with suggestions for additional audit work. So it's sort of building into the future, really, building into next year if I can, and it will give me the resources that I need. So if you like, there's no complaint from me about this, and we'll be pleased to support risk management development to a level that we haven't been able to previously. There is some work still required to bring us to a level of maturity that one would expect to see in a local authority, and so that's some of that's going to be quite hard to deliver. But I'm very happy to support that from within the team, using as I say, an experienced person on that to do that. But it does put a dent in my audit resources. So I've covered that through discussion, and we've got an agreed position, which is I'll go ahead and recruit a second temporary auditor grade post as part of this recruitment that we're going ahead. So I'm sorry that's not more fully explained in the report, Chair. I apologise. It's alluded to rather than directly stated, but as I say, it was still under discussion at the time I put this together. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Jane, I think you're happy at that?
Totally. No, that's absolutely fine. That's totally reassuring. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On that note, we've been asked to note the appendix at 2.1, so we can note that. And 2.2, we've been asked to agree the internal audit plan, and we've had a fair bit of discussion and reassurance, I think, for Kevin, particularly around about the detail of that. So thank you for that. We can agree that as well. Item number 11. It's our internal audit professional quality assessment. This is the purpose of this. Excuse me. The purpose of this report. I take it that's to advise members of the arrangements for an external quality assessment for internal audit. Slight typo there. Just okay, Kevin. This is your report, I think. So if you want to say some words to it, please.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions on it. It's really putting the position in, but it's formally documenting that position, which is important, I think. So I'm more than happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you. Kevin, looking at members, no, everybody looks quite content actually, Kevin. So I'm looking. Oh, here's Councillor Dryborough. Archie.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And, thanks for the report, Kevin. And I'm looking at the purpose of the EQ and 3.8, the internal audit team's conformance with professional standards. And obviously, we had a discussion earlier on about training and how COVID has affected that particular area. Are you happy with the CPD of the staff that you have? And if not, have you got an action in place to bring them up to that standard?
Thank you, Chair. I'll answer directly through you. Yes, in a normal year, in a normal plan, I would allow 5 days CPD per person. And generally I stand over them and make sure that they do something within that 5 days. That 5 days is for their personal and professional development. So we try and do stuff. It can be difficult. 2 of us are professionally qualified, and there is quite a structured CPD opportunity for professionally qualified people through their institutes. For the staff who aren't professionally qualified, it's more difficult to find adequate and appropriate CPD. Plus also, of course, we have constraints in terms of costs of courses and stuff like that. But we do broaden. The key thing about CPD is to be aware of developments in the profession of auditing, which we discuss at team meetings and so on. We have a chat about all that. But also to sort of externalize yourself, so to speak, from your own job and understand what's going on. So I put my team, as far as possible, onto seminars or onto these sorts of things that take place within the profession, so that they're broadened, their horizons are broadened. That's the main purpose of it. As I say, there's 2 professionally qualified people. All of my team, I have been enormously benefited by the fact that we have a mature and stable team. I think the youngest person we've got on the team has been with us for more than 15 years. And in fact, members themselves sometimes have scratched their heads and said, is that a good thing or not? So again, it's something that we need to address in terms of saying, well, it is a good thing, but equally we need to be able to prove to you that we do not go stale. We externalize ourselves as much as possible. So it's striking that balance in managing the team.
So on that particular point then, Kevin, of having the more sort of mature relationship on your team, succession planning, of course, is really important for the future benefit of the council and what internal audit actually does. So are you looking at the future, and are we looking at bringing people forward to take over eventually, those more senior people in the department?
Indeed, Chair, answering through you, the recruitment that we're about to undertake, the full-time post, sorry, the permanent appointment will be very important in balancing the team, hopefully to a younger age profile than we currently have. That's no disrespect to my colleagues and their maturity. So yes, so this is part of the feature, if you like, of this recruitment, is actually bringing somebody in new, who we may have to train up a bit, but that doesn't matter. The point is, it's new ideas, fresh outlook, and somebody who may be in a position perhaps to undertake qualifications and this sort of stuff. So we would support them in doing that very much so. So yeah, it's succession planning is very much in my mind, Chair, at the current time.
Thank you.
Thank you both for that. So what we're looking at is we've been asked to agree the basis for commissioning an external assessment of internal audit's compliance with the professional standards for internal auditing as per paragraphs 3.7 to 3.11 as outlined. So you've got to come in there, Kevin, for a second. So we've agreed that. No other business, really. I mean, I think maybe for the sake of Thursday, we should, I don't know if Sue's still on, but undertake a risk assessment, a method statement, how we would remove the icicles from the ceiling. It's extremely cold in here today, but it's kept everybody awake and sharp, I think. That's the important bit.
Ian, I think Elaine sent an email out. Some members are opting you to stay at home because there's got to be too many people in, but Elaine is putting her email out to bring warm clothes because it's got to have to be ventilated that day.
All right, we'll keep in mind on that, and hopefully it's a bit warmer. We'll get a wee warm draft, but it's cold. It's been in here for a wee while. The heat comes on about November time, I think, if I remember correctly. So anyways, thanks members who are here physically and virtually. I appreciate you coming today and a high level of participation as per usual. I appreciate that, and thank you very much to our officials in the room and virtually again, everybody who joined us. Thanks very much, and we'll see you at the next one, some of you at full council. Thanks very much.